A girl gave birth in an abandoned prison after the end of the world. Hello all. This is Jacobson and this is a brief retelling of the third and fourth episodes of the third season of the zombie series The Walking Dead. You can see the previous episodes at the links in the video description. Thank you so much for participating and the 900 subscribers. Hopefully we'll keep it up and by the next video we'll have 1000 subscribers. Once this video gets 200 likes, I will release the next installment. Enjoy watching it. A military helicopter is flying when the engine starts to suffer mechanical problems after presumably being shot by the governor. The helicopter crashes in the forest with 3 soldiers on board. Andrea and Michonne spot the wreckage's smoke from a distance and go to investigate. Michonne wraps her pet zombie's chains around a tree, and hides Andrea in the foliage so she can go and investigate the wreckage. 2 vehicles approach suddenly. Michonne retreats to the bushes with Andrea. From the bushes, Andrea and Michonne watch as a group of men rescue the pilot and stab the 2 soldiers who died in the crash. Michonne's pet walkers rattle their chains, drawing the newcomers' attention. She decapitates the walkers to silence them, but, regardless, the 2 are still discovered by Merle Dixon, who is now sporting a bayonet prosthetic hand. Andrea, still unwell and in shock of Merle's unexpected return, passes out. Andrea wakes up blindfolded in the back of a car and overhears the group's leader giving instructions via a CB radio. Before passing out again, she witnesses the car approaching a massive wooden gate. In an unfamiliar room, a doctor administers an IV to Andrea as Michonne watches. Merle joins them and recounts the story of his escape from Atlanta, saying he nearly bled to death after sawing off his hand. Andrea says his brother, Daryl, and the rest of the survivors went back for him, and that Daryl was still alive when she last saw him months ago. She tells Merle about the deaths of the camp members she is aware of, including Amy. Merle is saddened by this and offers his condolences. The group's leader, the governor, arrives and quietly confers with Merle. Michonne demands their weapons back. The governor assures her they're free to leave the next day, at which point their weapons will be returned. When Andrea asks why he knifed the dead soldiers, the governor explains that anyone who dies turns into a walker, stating that he put them out of their misery. The governor escorts Andrea and Michonne outside to reveal a peaceful, torch-lit street, saying, "Welcome to Woodbury." He shows them the reason for his confidence in their safety: a sturdy, heavily guarded wall. Andrea marvels as the guards, led by Merle, take out 3 approaching walkers. The governor shows them to their room, where fresh clothes are laid out. Michonne is visibly skeptical, especially when the governor tells them one of his men will be stationed just outside. The next day, Rowan, a Woodbury resident, takes Andrea and Michonne on a tour. Children happily roam the street as people go about their business. The guide reveals that 73 people live in the town and that there have been no casualties since the winter, thanks in part to the governor's strict curfew. Meanwhile, the governor visits Wells, the badly injured helicopter pilot. Wells reveals that he left 10 men behind so he could scout ahead. "Tell me where they are," the governor claims, "and I promise if they're still alive, I'll bring them here." The governor goes to his advisor Milton's lab, where he discovers Milton and Merle in a disagreement. The governor chastises them and orders Merle to go learn more about Andrea. Alone, the governor and Milton study the still-living heads from Michonne's pet walkers. Milton remarks that Michonne removed their arms and jaws, saying, "Take away their ability to eat. They lose interest in doing so." He explains that the mutilated walkers acted as a repellent. Later, Milton joins the governor for breakfast with Andrea and Michonne. Milton explains his theory that walkers retain a trace of the person they once were, asking Michonne about her walker pets. "You did know them, didn't you?" Michonne stays quiet, speaking only to demand the return of their weapons. The governor urges them to rest a while longer. After breakfast, Michonne declares her mistrust for the governor, but Andrea wants to stay in Woodbury longer. Picking up on Milton's query, Andrea asks Michonne about her pets. "Those walkers were with us all winter long, protecting us," she says, "and you took them out without any hesitation." "It was easier than you think," Michonne replies. She leaves Andrea, visibly upset. Meanwhile, the governor tracks down Wells' squad and drives up alone, waving a white flag. He tells the squad leader that he found their pilot and offers to escort them to Woodbury. As the men relax in relief, the governor draws a gun and opens fire. Woodbury men emerge from the perimeter and gun down the rest of the soldiers. The governor orders them to collect all of their weapons. The governor and his men return to town with the military trucks, along with weaponry, medicine, and other desperately needed supplies. The townspeople gather as the governor deceives them into thinking that the soldiers had already fallen to biters, their word for walkers, leaving behind their trucks, medicine, food, and weapons. As the crowd disperses, Andrea asks the governor for his real name. "I never tell," he says. "Never say never," Andrea replies. The governor grins, murmuring, "Never." That evening, the governor looks over Woodbury from his apartment window as he sips from a glass of whiskey. He walks past Rowan, who is lying naked in his bed, and gazes at a framed photo of his wife and daughter before entering an adjoining, private room. Inside, he settles into a chair and stares numbly ahead, where 3 rows of aquariums are filled with live walker heads. Among them are the heads of Michonne's pet zombies and the head of the newly decapitated Wells. An unidentified person wearing prison garb brings in a gas can and a deer corpse, dragging it into the prison. The unidentified person then tosses rocks at a couple of walkers to obtain their attention. The walkers feast on the deer carcass that has been strategically spread out to lure the walkers towards the prison gate. The person then breaks open the prison gate, placing the deer's heart in front of it. The survivors are discussing plans to clear out the prison yard when Axel and Oscar approach, begging to join their group. T-Dog is in favor of allowing them, but many within the group disagree, expressing their concerns. Finally, Rick insists that they stick to their agreement, and the prisoners must stay in their cell block, or leave the prison. In Woodbury, Michonne inspects the salvaged National Guard trucks, noticing bullet holes and traces of blood. She questions the governor about the circumstances of the soldiers' deaths. He dodges her suspicions and attempts convincing her and Andrea to stay in Woodbury. Back at the prison, Rick instructs Glenn to give Axel and Oscar a week's worth of supplies and send them on their way. Axel tries to ingratiate himself with Daryl by offering to tune his motorcycle, but Daryl ignores him. Meanwhile, Beth and Lori leave the safety of Cell Block C, assisting Herschel in getting comfortable with his crutches. In their room, Michonne and Andrea discuss plans to head for the coast after leaving Woodbury. "I'd rather take my chances out there than stay here," Michonne declares. "Because your gut tells you there's something off about this place." "About the governor?" Andrea asks. Andrea must decide to trust Michonne's instincts, which have helped keep them alive all winter, or try to learn more about the governor and Woodbury. As Rick and the others clear the yard, Lori, Carl, and Beth escort Herschel outside. The group rejoices at Herschel's recovery, and Rick and Lori share warm looks from a distance, causing Lori to blush. However, the warm moment is interrupted as a group of walkers suddenly flood the courtyard. Gunfire erupts as Rick, Daryl, and Glenn race to join the fight. Herschel and Beth lock themselves in a fenced-in entryway while Maggie, Lori, and Carl flee into the cell block. While resealing the courtyard gate with Carol, T-Dog is bitten on the shoulder by a walker before he and Carol flee to safety inside the prison. Back in Woodbury, Andrea reveals to Merle the location of Herschel's farm so he can search for Daryl. When she declines his offer to join, he remarks that they were both abandoned, and then rescued, by the same 2 groups of people. Andrea asks Merle if the governor is a good man. "I wasn't in the best of shape when he found me," Merle replies. "He should have just kept on going." "Yeah, he's a good man." In the prison yard, Glenn reports that someone had cut the gate open. When Axel and Oscar approach, Rick accuses them. Just then, the prison's alarm sounds, attracting more walkers to the outer fence. Oscar explains the backup generators must be powering it, proving that someone else is messing with things from inside the prison, and follows Rick inside to disable them. Wandering the prison hallways, Carol offers to do whatever's necessary to help T-Dog with his bite, but he insists on guiding her back to the cell block before he dies. Lori, Carl, and Maggie are also wandering when the stress of the situation causes Lori to go into labor. Carl leads them into the boiler room. Meanwhile, Merle discusses leaving to search for his brother Daryl using the information that Andrea provided. The governor says he can't risk losing Merle on a wild goose chase, but agrees to help him search for Daryl if he can obtain more concrete information. Back at the cell block, Rick, Daryl, Glenn, Axel, and Oscar separate into teams to look for the others and shut down the backup generators. In the boiler room, Maggie assists Lori in removing her pants and gets her ready to deliver the baby naturally. Carl stares at them in confusion and horror. But as Lori pushes through her contractions, she begins to hemorrhage. T-Dog and Carol reach the laundry room doors, but their path is blocked by two walkers. Out of ammo, Carol looks to turn back, but T-Dog, knowing that he is already doomed, charges at them, pinning them against a wall, urging Carol to keep going. She reaches the doors, but looks back in horror and sadness as the walkers begin to devour T-Dog. Back in Woodbury, Andrea and the governor share a parting drink in his apartment, where he reveals his real name, Philip, and that his wife died in a car accident before the apocalypse. Andrea reveals that she isn't sure what she wants anymore. Before she leaves, the governor tells her that she is welcome to return to Woodbury anytime. Andrea tells Michonne she wants to stay longer, but Michonne doesn't want any part of it, and storms out. Rick, Oscar, and Daryl reach the generator room, where they find Andrew, still alive and waiting to attack them, revealing that he lured the walkers and caused the attack as his revenge. As Andrew and Rick struggle, Oscar throws a barrel which hits Andrew in the head and picks up Rick's gun. The two men stop fighting and Oscar aims his weapon at Rick. Andrew urges him to shoot Rick, but Oscar changes his mind, and decides to shoot Andrew in the head instead, returning the pistol he is holding to Rick. Rick powers down the generator. In the boiler room, Lori grows faint as the hemorrhaging continues. She realizes she will not survive natural childbirth. "I'm not losing my baby," she tells Maggie. "You've got to cut me open." Lori tearfully says goodbye to Carl, telling him that he is smart and strong, and that he has what it takes to survive the apocalyptic world. "Don't let the world spoil you," she says. "You're the best thing I ever did." Maggie reluctantly slices Lori's abdomen open and scoops the baby out. The baby survives, but Lori lays motionless, blood pouring from her open wound. Maggie starts to leave with the baby when Carl stops her. "We can't just leave her here," Carl says. "She'll turn." Carl insists on perform the coup de grace as the son. Maggie moves away and hears a gunshot. Carl walks briskly past her towards the exit. Rick, Daryl, Axel, Oscar and Glenn move through the prison, taking out a pair of walkers, and discovering T-Dog's mutilated remains. Daryl finds Carol's scarf and gun, and the five of them move outside, where they reunite with Herschel and Beth. As Rick plans to go back and search for the rest of the survivors, the cries of a baby ring out. Maggie and Carl emerge with the newborn baby. Rick collapses in grief and sorrow when he realizes Lori is not with them, as Glenn consoles Maggie and the others look on in shock and sadness as Rick reels. The end of the third and fourth series. As soon as this video gets 200 likes and 20 comments, I will release the sequel.